Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, I've decided to just put an image of myself. Now, I will be reading from the last chapter of my book Wronian Motion, a stupid pun on Brownian motion, where I provide detail like I never have before about how to type. Um, well, every letter on the computer keyboard and a bunch of other stuff. I'm going to skip the bits about each individual letter and just read the general stuff. All right, I'm going to decide where to start. Okay, here's a good paragraph to start on. It's a couple pages in. Naturally, people ask me to explain my typing style and tell them which fingers I use to type each letter. Since I type completely on instinct at this point, it took me quite a while to reconstruct my typing style for the masses, but I eventually did so by improvising a variety of different words, isolating each letter in different contexts. I intrinsically understood that typing involved combinations of letters and that the surrounding letters of a word influence where you should position your hands, but I was unable to properly convey this in a way that made sense to others. Finally, after reading Dvorak's typewriting behavior, everything clicked into place, and now I believe I can describe what I taught myself to do without even thinking about it and why it is an improvement over home row. In Dvorak's book, he was sharply critical of the QWERTY keyboard not having a, in quotes, true home row, because the letters that appeared on it were rather arbitrary. It is correct that QWERTY's home row does not make much sense because the original QWERTY layout was simply based on the first half of the alphabet in alphabetical order A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M on the top row, and the second half of the alphabet in reverse alphabetical order, Z, Y, X, W, V, U, T, S, R, Q, P, O, N on the bottom row. Then Christopher Scholes and the Remington engineers moved the vowels and several consonants onto the top row while leaving the remainder of the second and third rows mostly intact. You can still see this in the current QWERTY home rows D, F, G, H, J, K, L, which simply consists of 7 consecutive consonants in alphabetical order. I agree with Dvorak that if you want to scientifically engineer a home row, this is not the way to do it. However, Dvorak never explains why a keyboard should have a home row in the first place, and on this point I believe he was wrong. The reason the home row method does not make sense is because people's fingers are not the same length. Generally speaking, most people's ring, middle, and index fingers are substantially longer than their pinkies and thumbs. These fingers are also usually the most powerful fingers, and therefore they are the fingers that should be used most frequently in typing. Because the middle 3 fingers are longer, they naturally want to stretch longer than the pinky and the thumb do. When you type according to the home row method, you are forced to shrivel up your index, middle, and ring fingers in an awkward position, which creates resistance in those fingers and prevents the typist from maximizing speed on them. It's even worse since you're essentially handicapping your most powerful fingers rather than your weakest ones by doing this. I believe that is a major reason why QWERTY is still competitive with Dvorak that few people have ever talked about. And now I'll switch tabs and look at the comments again. Um, okay, there was nothing that I needed to respond to yet. It is easier for fingers 2 through 4 to type on the top row than on the middle row, and the QWERTY keyboard places extremely frequently used letters like E, R, T, I, and O in those positions. Most alternative layouts have not figured this out yet and still insist on putting some combination of the most frequent letters in the center or home row. While this is a massive disadvantage for alternative layouts, Dvorak still has some advantages. It is certainly faster to learn, as it is easier to memorize the locations of the more frequently used keys, and it puts more weight on the right hand when most people are right-handed. However, Dvorak really limits itself by having a weaker top row when that is the row that the most powerful fingers would prefer to type on with the least resistance. The best possible alternative keyboard layout would both scientifically weight the keyboard so no finger is overused and so that the more frequently powerful right hand is used more, as Dvorak does, but would also place the most frequently used letters on the center of the top row like QWERTY does. The best possible home row would actually be a home curve designed so that the pinkies type on the center row while the index, middle, and ring fingers type on the top row. As far as I know, no such layout that combines both QWERTY and Dvorak's advantages exists. I'm not sure whether QWERTY's advantage or Dvorak's advantage is a bigger one, but I am confident that the difference isn't very large. Admittedly, almost all the elite typists in the Anglophone world today exclusively use QWERTY, but so does the English-speaking population at large. I suspect there's nothing intrinsically wrong with Dvorak, and the main reason there are few elite Dvorak typists is because most typists do not learn about alternative layouts until their adult years, while they learn QWERTY at a much younger age. Since people improve more rapidly at a task in early childhood, this may be the sole difference that explains why the vast majority of the fastest typists use QWERTY. I have nothing against Dvorak, but I'm sticking with QWERTY. It's just frustrating when many of the more overzealous Dvorak supporters act like they are some sort of elite for having discovered something the general public doesn't know about, and consequently how any QWERTY user must be some stupid moron or noob or lazy Luddite for not having converted. While Dvorak does have some advantages, so does QWERTY, and QWERTYs have seriously been underreported. Although Dvorak certainly is better for you if you are a home row typist, you shouldn't be a home row typist since people's hands aren't built that way. If you can type QWERTY using a more efficient method, you can do as well as you can on Dvorak, if not better. Just try to get the home row method out of your brain. This isn't to say you can't be fast using home row on QWERTY. Typists like Kathy Chang prove otherwise, but I do think it is much more difficult to do so. For most of the rest of the chapter, I will discuss how to best optimize your typing for QWERTY, and particularly which fingers you should use to type each key in particular situations. I will not be providing advice on how to type alternate layouts like Dvorak or Colmac, both because I have never used them and because those layouts are designed for the user to type specific keys with the same fingers repeatedly, so there isn't as much strategy involved in learning those layouts, while QWERTY at its most optimized is not. I'm going to check the comments again. Oh, all right. I have a choppy stream. They're telling me I have a choppy stream, probably because I have two video windows open. Yeah, hi Angelo and Rohit. I certainly know both of you very well. Um, okay, yes, Celeste deals. I'm going to talk about typing rhythm later. I include that in this chapter. I do mention caps lock as well. Um, Reckful hasn't been on Type Racer in years, I think, so I think he's kind of moved on from that. I beat Reckful 84 out of 85 races I competed against him. I mean, I went through all my past races back to 2011 and calculated my records versus everyone. I have a site for that. Um, I'm not reading the entire last chapter. I go into detail about how I type every single key on the keyboard, and I'm not reading that. I don't want to give out everything. And yeah, hey Brian. Slow down on hard words and burst on short words tends to be my advice. Anybody who's telling you that probably heard it from me because that's something I sort of came up with myself that I don't think anybody actually told me. The thing is, people don't necessarily know what the easiest and the hardest words are. It's not exactly what you think. And I'll go into that in a later video where I read from the chapter before this. I don't think the quality of the keyboard matters much. I'm not going to say it doesn't matter at all, but I don't think it matters much. Hey, Furry and Shadowy. Shariar, I don't know how to pronounce your name. I hope I got it right. I don't know whether I ever really plateaued or not, but um, I know I have improved since I started on Typeracer. I average 164 words per minute or so when I started in 2009. Now I average like 184 most of the time, so I have gone up 20 words per minute. And um, I think everybody plateaus all the time, but I think everybody also improves steadily. Like you kind of don't know whether you've improved until after it's already happened. It's always steady unless you're just learning to type, unless you've just been touch typing for a year or two. Um, Anticipation style typing, well, yeah, I do talk about centering your fingers around the most frequently used letters, and I will get there. Um, I'm taking a break from active competition on Typeracer, although I plan on setting more 10 fast fingers records this month in other languages probably. Um, Ice Shock, I may have the fastest typing average of anyone on QWERTY, but that's because computer keyboards are a lot easier to use than mechanical typewriters. And I mean, Stella Pajunas managed 216 words in a single minute in the 40s on a mechanical typewriter. I managed 220 words per minute on 10 fast fingers, which was the first verified thing to break her record. But it's a lot easier to type on a modern computer keyboard than a mechanical. Well, she didn't have a mechanical typewriter. She had an electric typewriter. Um, and also, I think that she had a lot of capital letters and punctuation to type in whatever she typed. I have not been able to verify what Pajunas typed, but while on 10 fast fingers there's almost no capitalization or punctuation. Um, Napkin, yes, I've had months where I dropped off, but they were usually only like months. I started typing when I was 3, and I joined Typeracer when I was 24. So, I hit 100 words per minute the first time when I was 10. I did 108 words per minute on an old DOS application called CPT Personal Touch Typing, and I just tracked down the guy who created that game. I found him, and um, I might be able to get an interview with him for one of my earlier chapters. That was exciting. Um, What prevents you from just shifting your head down, your hand down? I mean, I kind of do that. I, I kind of do that as well. Um, my point is that I think there are a lot of people who do center their fingers on ASDF, JKL, semicolon, because they are trained to. Um, my point is not really so much that you should move your fingers up and just type on the top row. My point is that you should stretch your fingers out where they want to go, and maybe I didn't make that clear enough. Um, Instant death mode. Sure, if I'm planning 30 videos in 30 days in the month of April, maybe I could go into instant death mode for a bit. I didn't enjoy it much, and obviously people like Aaron Adams would be better, but typing in the mainstream. Typing was very mainstream in the pre-World War II years. Um, Nobody was making money doing competitive typing in the second half of the 20th century. They all had regular jobs. Um, the closest thing in the second half of the 20th century was Cortez Peters Jr., who wrote typing guides and toured the nation training typing teachers. That was the closest to somebody who was able to make a living at it. The thing is, the kinds of gaming that are profitable, they're popular and they're also exciting to watch, while people think typing is boring to watch. You know how the biggest movies nowadays are invariably things about some sort of speculative fiction, whether it is comic books, sci-fi, anime, fantasy, um, dystopia, stuff like that. Those are always the things that make the most money. Similarly for video games, the kind of video games where the people who actually play them make money are um, things that look like those sort of movies. World of Warcraft, StarCraft, Fortnite. Um, I don't know if people are making money at Grand Theft Auto or not, but you know what I mean. Typing is just too static and dull to watch for people, and it's because it's not a very watchable activity, even though it is popular, that I kind of think that it'll never be profitable. I mean, there are far more important things to worry about now. It looks like we're entering a second Great Depression right now due to the coronavirus. So I mean, having having gaming jobs is much less important than having the regular economy functioning, if you know what I mean. Um, all right, I don't think any of those remaining comments really requires a separate response. So I'm going to go back to reading excerpts, not the entire chapter. It's probably going to be about a third of the chapter. I'm going to skip how to type each individual letter. For that, you will have to get the book, but I will read the general advice I've come up with, both by practicing how I typed each word um, and my research on what the fastest and slowest words and keys and rows of the keyboard are. Um, Tempt, you really should use most of your fingers while typing. You should use at least 9. I think you're okay using only one thumb, but you should integrate the other 9. Tran, I do not remember. I do not remember the first time I learned to type. I say that it was when I was 3 years old, but it is before my conscious memories. Um, The earliest proof I have is that I typed 83 words per minute at 6 years old, so it was probably 3 or 4 when I first used that application. I did save a printout, and I scanned it in and included on my website that I typed 83 words per minute at age 6 and 108 words per minute at age 10. And then I basically stopped using typing applications until TypeRacer. There was one typing application I had when I was 16 that my father had at his place. I did not save anything from it. I don't even remember what that application was called, but I got 199 words per minute on it a lot. And I think the game did not allow you to go over that. It was like that one site. Oh, I forgot the name of it. Key Hero. Key Hero does not let you post a score of 200 words per minute or greater. And the application my father had appeared to be the same way because I got 199 a lot on it. So it seems like most of my improvement was between age 10 and age 16. I am going back to reading. After another couple pages of that, I'll go back and look at the comments again. One of the most important observations to make is the one Dvorak himself made over 80 years ago. You should think about your typing in terms of digraphs rather than individual letters. A digraph is a set of two characters, such as DE or IN or ST. Dvorak observed that even when trained typists were forced to type one letter at a time, they weren't particularly fast. This indicates that typing is not merely a matter of how quickly or even how accurately you type individual letters, but about how quickly you type combinations of those letters, and therefore people should practice typing techniques and patterns as they occur in regular English language writing. For this reason, he rejected keyboard drills, and so do I. Typists to this day learn to type by repeatedly drilling portions of the QWERTY keyboard like ASDF, JKL semicolon over and over, even though this doesn't actually make much sense. The SD, DF, JK, and KL digraphs occur very rarely in the English language, and the semicolon doesn't appear that often either. By focusing on such rarely used digraphs, you are wasting practice time on unimportant combinations while not focusing nearly enough on the digraphs or even letters that occur repeatedly in English. The ASDF JKL semicolon drill likely originated in piano drills, where pianists practiced improving their dexterity by playing scales. However, just because this drill works when learning the piano keyboard does not necessarily mean it extends to the computer keyboard. In typewriting behavior, Dvorak cited the studies of William F. Book and Harry D. Kitson, who attempted to determine whether there was a relationship between typing and other tasks involving manual dexterity. Book, using a test created by William L. Bryan, tested how quickly typists at each level from school champions all the way up to Albert Tangora and George Hosfield tapped a single telegraph key and observed that the current world typing champions were faster than the past ones, who in turn were faster than the amateurs and novices as expected. However, Kitson showed that this could not be generalized to the pool of typists and non-typists at large. He found that the difference between typists and non-typists on this test was marginal, and the advantage pianists had over people with no experience on piano was even less. This implies that although the majority of great typists do seem to share a similar set of traits, these skills in and of themselves don't make you a great typist. And I go a lot more into that in this chapter, but I'm skipping the rest of that. And I will go back to the comments. Yes, there was only one Ultimate Typing Championship. No, I literally taught myself to touch type when I was either in preschool or kindergarten. My father was not a very fast typist at all. My mom was briefly, well, for a decade or so, she was a civil service secretary in the Syracuse area, and she was she was the fastest typist at her workplace, but I overtook her in my childhood for sure. Um, just like Michael DeRoche overtook his typing teacher when he was 7, which he told me when I interviewed him. Um, can I type against Viewer and TypeRacer? I don't know who Viewer is, and I'm not typing tonight. I'm just reading and chatting. I think the advice that I'm going to give in the last 2 chapters of my book will help people to type faster, yes. Would I best my viewers in TypeRacer if I was using my pointer fingers? I forgot what the pointer finger is. Is the pointer finger the pinky? I don't think I'm particularly strong on my left pinky, although I think I'm very strong on my right pinky. Um, the fastest I ever did on TypeRacer was 274 words per minute, but I failed the CAPTCHA, and then later I got up to 271 words per minute. That was when Kathy's record was 279 words per minute. I did not really make a push to improve upon that after that. My record on Typing Zone was my all-time fastest. I don't remember what it was, but I can log in there and check. Um, 1 minute 34 seconds. 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 1 minute 34 seconds My record on typing zone was 232.77 words per minute, although that site defines words per minute as 6 characters per word instead of 5, so I have to multiply that by 1.2 to find out what it equates to on QWERTY. 279.3, that is my fastest. That is the fastest I've ever typed, even though it was a goofy sentence on typing zone. Michael completely went offline last fall because he thought he was getting addicted to online and wanted to focus on other stuff. Lately he has coincidentally been studying Scrabble words. And I've been giving him some tips on Scrabble, and that seems to be his thing now more than typing. He'll probably go back online someday, but he's not in a big hurry to. I still call him on the phone every couple weeks or so, and I've been reading him parts of the book also, other parts. I don't hold Dvorak typists in low regard at all. I I hold people who sneer at other people for choosing something that isn't sophisticated enough in low regard. There is a difference. I'm talking more about like newspaper columnists who don't really know anything and say that Dvorak is superior to QWERTY without having any knowledge, or people who take Barbara Blackburn's records at face value without noticing that most of the other records were set on QWERTY too. I'm not talking about Dvorak typists here. I'm not going after Dvorak typists. I'm going after the kind of Dvorak supremacists who think that anybody who's not using it is lazy or dumb or something. And that's more of a media narrative than something I've actually seen with Dvorak typists myself. Maybe I should tone down my rhetoric, but I wasn't going after Dvorak typists there, just the people who sneer at QWERTY typists. Hexishu, I just answered that. 279 words per minute on typing zone was the fastest I have ever done. And I'm going back to reading. Personally, I tend to reject the idea of resting your fingers on any default keys as the home row method recommends. As much as possible, you want to center your fingers in the proper position for the next digraph you have to type. To optimize your typing for the QWERTY keyboard, I believe it is best to not have a standard or default position for your fingers to allow the maximum flexibility to adjust them on the fly as needed. Ultimately, you should type in a way that feels natural to you because one of the main goals in typing mastery is never pausing. And I also believe you are less likely to hurt yourself typing if you type in a position that feels natural to your fingers, which in my opinion, home row does not. Never pausing means more than merely avoiding errors. While that is necessary, it is by no means sufficient. You also want to minimize the time it takes to type each digraph, which home row does not do efficiently. The closer you move your fingers to the center of gravity of a word, the fewer pauses you will make while moving your fingers to the next key, and the faster you should be as a result. While it takes quite a bit of practice to get to the level where you are no longer centering your hands anywhere, it is probably the fastest way you can type on QWERTY. Since not everybody's hands have the same shape, nor do everyone's fingers have the same lengths or length ratios between them, the most efficient typing method for me may not also be the most efficient for you. Regardless, there are some general principles that you can follow to speed up your typing of individual digraphs and thereby improve your typing in general. Although I do not recommend resting your fingers on any particular keys, if you choose to do so anyway, you should focus on the letters that appear the most often in the language you are typing, not the letters on any specific row or column. According to a study of cryptographers during my freshman year at Cornell, the 10 most frequent letters in the English language are in order ETAOINSHRD. So you want to place your fingers as close as possible to these letters in order to save as much time between keystrokes as you can. Luckily on the QWERTY keyboard this is very possible. You just need to adjust your style and place your left-hand fingers on the keys ASER by default instead of ASDF, and your right-hand fingers on NIO apostrophe instead of JKL semicolon. Not only does this place your fingers by default near the most common letters, it will likely feel better on your fingers and create less resistance on your more powerful middle three fingers than the home row method will. Your middle fingers want to stretch out further than your pinky and your thumb do, and by placing them on the top row while leaving your pinkies on the middle row, you are not scrunching up any of your fingers and they are hence closer to their natural positions, except for the N and to a lesser degree the S. Even though the home row method indicates that you should center your fingers around the supposed guide keys F and J, you will be much faster if you center your fingers around the letters that most frequently occur in words. F and J are not the best choices. Once you realize that the F and J are only located where they are because of their placement in the alphabet, and that the QWERTY keyboard was invented before home row typing was, you will realize how inefficient traditional QWERTY drills are. It is no wonder students trained on Dvorak will improve faster. It is not because the Dvorak keyboard is intrinsically superior or inferior, but simply because Dvorak on home row is faster, and typing teachers erroneously believe home row is the most efficient typing method. Yet the myth persists to such a degree that most keyboards have bumps or ridges over the F and J, which aren't used very often, when you should really be focusing much more on how to press the keys that are most important, starting with the space bar, followed by the three most common letters, E, T, and A. And I'm going back to the comments. All right, after this I go into details about how to type each individual letter, but I'm going to skip over that right now and go to more general advice. I want to save at least something for the book itself. And one of my cats just came out. You might be able to hear him clawing. When you have to type the same letter twice in a row, there's not really a choice. Even though you will usually but not always be slower striking the same key the second time than you were the first, it will virtually always be faster to do this than switching fingers to type the same letter. I don't think most people even try to do that, but if you do, I definitely think it is not advisable. As I've said, you should try as much as possible to type consecutive letters with different fingers when you don't have to type the same letter back to back. But one of the ultimate goals is to get to a point where you're not thinking about what you're doing. It's better to type in whatever way that feels natural to you than directly following what I recommend in my personal style. While I think some of the things I emphasize and other typists don't are valuable, focusing on using longer fingers mostly on the higher rows and shorter fingers mostly on the lower rows, keeping hands and fingers from interfering with each other, placing your fingers on frequently used letters and away from little used ones. No two people have the same hands. Some people will find some of my stylistic choices more amenable, while others might prefer the conventional home row style. It's really about developing a style that works for you and then managing to have it become an unconscious thing to the point where you've completely memorized how you type every single word without having to think about it. I do think everybody could stand to type the same letters with different fingers more often than they usually do. But that certainly doesn't mean you need to do precisely what I'm doing to improve. My biggest advantage seems to stem from preparing my hands so they are adjusted on the fly to type the next word, which it seems like very few others do. By following that one singular principle, you'll probably improve a lot. While William F. Oswald, he was the 1919 national champion in the national typing champion in the United States. And in 1921, Oswald made only a single error in an entire hour of typing, but he lost the competition because a couple other typists were faster. While William F. Oswald may have not needed a backspace key, nobody in the modern world, not even Aaron Adams, is capable of going many minutes without making an error. Backspace, therefore, is a very important key, but it's not something people put enough emphasis in practicing because they are trained to practice as if they are not going to make errors in the first place, which is the case for no one. Since the backspace key is to the far top and right of the keyboard, far away from most other frequently used keys, you don't have much of a choice. You should use your middle finger to type it in most cases because it will get there the fastest, at least when making a single correction. This can significantly differ, of course, depending on whether you are just doing everyday typing or competitive typing. In competitive typing, it largely comes down to whether the site forces you to correct your typos or not, and what shortcuts you are allowed to use to correct your errors. Sites like NitroType and TypeArray and 10 Fast Fingers don't require you to correct your errors, so sometimes it's not worth it to do so if you can maintain your speed otherwise. Inner Steno doesn't require you to correct either, but the penalties for making an error are significantly steeper, and Inner Steno doesn't allow as many shortcuts as other sites do, so you should definitely backspace there. TypeRacer offers the widest variety of correction methods. Beyond just using backspace, you can use Control Backspace to erase the current word, Control A or Shift Home to select all the text you have typed and backspace it all at once. Control A is probably the most efficient method because you do not have to backspace afterward, while for Shift Home, you do. For some reason, I trained myself to use Shift Home, followed by backspace instinctually, and now it's second nature to me, even though it's fairly bizarre. So on TypeRacer, I always press Shift Home and usually press the Home button with my middle finger, forcing me to backspace with my index finger. But although it's awkward, it's definitely not as slow as you'd think, and I do still correct pretty quickly, although I definitely think if I'd learned Control A, I'd be faster at correcting. When not typing competitively, however, I would almost always type backspace with my middle finger. I'm going back to the chat. The right thumb is grossly superior on the QWERTY layout if you are right-handed. The reason for that is the vast majority of letters that frequently end words can, like almost all of them, can be typed with a letter that ends in the that ends with the left hand. The S, the E, the R, the D, the H, the Y, all those and a lot of words, and they can all be typed with the left hand. And you want to you want to alternate and use the hand you're not typing the last character with to type the space bar. Now I suppose you could always type the space bar with your right thumb after typing a left-hand character and type it with your left thumb after typing a right-hand character, but that's just confusing and easy to mess up. I would say always use the right thumb for the space bar. If you use your left thumb for anything, it should probably be to type the Z, X, C, and V, or some of those letters, because the bottom left is the slowest part of the keyboard, because there are so many more important letters on the left-hand side of the keyboard than those that there are tons of conflicts. So I might recommend, like Alpha Panda does, to use your left thumb on the bottom part of the left part of the bottom row. That cat is Punkin, Punkin. Oh, did the cat appear on screen? I couldn't tell. The fastest typist before me, there wasn't just one. I don't even think I'm the world's fastest typist in history. I think Cortez Peters Jr. was. He supposedly, in a demonstration for Xerox in the 80s, typed 297 words per minute over an entire minute, and nobody nowadays is close to that, although that could be apocryphal. I am struggling to verify that. It's really hard to find information on these 70s and 80s typists like him, Ron Mingo, Barbara Blackburn, and so on, because they were in the era of television, and they appeared on talk shows and stuff like that. And those aren't very well archived. You aren't going to find talk shows on DVD or on YouTube or whatever very much. Sure, Barbara Blackburn's appearance on Letterman is on there, and Ron Mingo's appearance on Real People is on there, and Michael Shestov's appearance on CNN is on there, but those are really brief bits. There's not really a lot written on the internet about them. And there wasn't much written in newspapers either, because that era was an era of newspaper consolidation when there used to be like multiple newspapers in almost every major city, and that was the period, the 70s and the 80s, where there was becoming like only one newspaper. So there was a lot less stuff being printed. And it's weird that a lot of the era immediately before the internet, the 70s, 80s, early 90s, is almost being entirely forgotten. I'm finding almost nothing about this contest Wayne Stoller won $10,000 in 1991 because it was mentioned briefly in newspapers. The Associated Press picked it up. It was a very short article. I haven't found very much. That's the hardest era to find information on. So while I think Cortez Peters Jr. was actually the fastest typist in history, not me, I'm having a hard time verifying his stuff because it came from that era. That's a weird wormhole between the glory days of newspapers and the glory days of the internet when there just wasn't a lot of stuff printed. Um, no, I mean middle finger for backspace. My, um, you want you want your longest fingers to go to the highest rows, and you want your shortest fingers to go on the shortest rows generally. I think the middle finger is better for backspace than the ring. Um, Although I do think I use my ring for backspace a lot too. I mean, but I think I use middle mostly. Um, yes, it's possible to type 250 words per minute, but only on short intervals. Modified home row is better than home row. Um, I'm going back to reading. The most unconventional deviation from standard typing form I make may be my strong preference for using the caps lock instead of the shift key to type capital letters. Because I taught myself to type long before I really paid any attention to what I was doing, I unfortunately can't remember why I decided to do that, but my dad's ex-girlfriend's stepdaughter, whom I knew when I was 10, wrote on Reddit that I used the caps lock back then because my hands were simply too small to reach many of the shift plus letter combinations. By the time I learned this was supposedly wrong, it was far too late to change. However, I'm not entirely convinced that it is wrong. One of the main reasons I continue to prefer caps lock to this day is that it allows me the utmost flexibility to adjust my hand positioning on the fly whenever I need to. By holding down the shift key for a split second, it locks your left hand into place and limits how quickly you can reach other letters. I also don't like it because it is a lot easier to feel when you have pushed and released the caps lock because it is firm like all the letter keys, unlike the shift key, which is generally softer and squishier. So I feel substantially more confidence with caps lock that I will not make an error. Granted, I am not the fastest at typing capital letters. Izzy is, while I am the fastest at typing most lowercase characters, so what I am doing is probably wrong. Izzy's method instead is to hold down the right shift key, which makes a lot of sense since few of the letters that frequently start words are on the right side of the keyboard. Of course, I'm still forced to type all the punctuation marks and other characters that require the shift, so I'm not too bad with it, but I'd honestly prefer to type even things like the question mark and the colon with the caps lock if I were able to do that. Um, and in the previous chapter, I go into great detail about who is fastest on each type of key and each type of word and what the fastest keys were and what the fastest words were. Um, the only things I was not the fastest at were uppercase letters, Izzy was, and uppercase punctuation, or punctuation requiring shift. Calling it uppercase punctuation is sort of silly. Noah was the fastest on that, perhaps surprisingly. He was the fastest on most of those keys. I was only the fastest on 2 capital letters. So that does lead me to believe caps lock is probably wrong, but it's not enough to be a big hindrance since the amount I'm behind Izzy on capital letters is nowhere near as large as the amount. Well, actually, it might be about as much as the amount I'm ahead of him on lowercase letters, but lowercase letters are so more frequent it ends up not mattering much. And I'm going to read the chat again. Do I use the right shift at any point? Never, basically never. Um, my right hand, I devote it as much as possible to typing the spacebar, punctuation, um, 7, 8, 9, and 0, and the letters on the right hand, especially N, I, and O, which are the only really important ones. All right, going back to reading. One important area where I significantly differ from the typists of days of yore is in terms of typing rhythm. Vintage early 20th century typists like Albert Tangora and George Hosfield were always talking about how typists in general should strive for perfect rhythm, which I took to mean typing at a continuous rate of speed without ever speeding up or slowing down. Many of the typists of that era would do exhibitions where they would start at 20 words per minute and then steadily increase their typing speed in increments of 20 words per minute until they got to whatever their peak speed was. They seemed to have a real knack of always being able to feel how fast they were going in a way I often couldn't, although maybe that was easier to do on a mechanical typewriter than a computer keyboard. Regardless, the idea of perfect rhythm never made any sense to me because some words are easier to type than others, and some letter combinations are easier to make than others, as I revealed in the last chapter. Once again, reading Dvorak taught me something I already had learned myself. He particularly stressed that perfect rhythm was not simply a matter of typing all words at the same rate of speed. He acknowledged that that wasn't possible. To Dvorak, perfect rhythm entailed consistency of motion and making each individual motion in a consistent time interval while accepting that some motions take more time than others to make. This is essentially what I do. For years I have recommended the exact opposite of the early 20th century typist advice and advise people to speed through the easier words and take more time to type the harder ones to maintain a steady accuracy. I feel ideally you should be equally likely to make a typo on every word. If you are consistently making typos on certain words, you should slow down on them to gain accuracy, while if there are words you never typo on, you should take a risk and burst on them more aggressively. I think one of my advantages is precisely this. Although I'm neither the fastest in raw speed nor the most accurate typist, I seem to have found the golden mean between accuracy and speed, so that I'm faster than any of the more accurate typists, and more accurate than any of the faster ones, which usually results in me obtaining the highest averages. I think one of the keys is instinctually being able to feel how aggressively or conservatively to type each individual word, and I think I'm better at feeling that than most people, which in my opinion is what perfect rhythm really is. As a result, I don't really have easy words or hard words, I just have words. Another piece of advice I've been offering for years is to always focus on the next word while typing the current one. This is obviously a point made by many people in numerous athletic or otherwise mechanical endeavors. Runners know that you should always have your mind focused on the next step, and the same principle holds true for typing. The text you are typing is a guide, and you want to focus on avoiding any hesitations. What this also means in practice is that when you are typing competitively, you shouldn't be reading the words or especially reading for comprehension. If you're reading each word while you type it, you're falling behind. You need to cultivate the ability to keep the next word in mind at all times to minimize your spacing time, particularly because the spacebar is the most important key on the keyboard. This is not easy for everyone and not always easy for me. When I have to type something that actively annoys me, such as the type racer quotes about pregnant men, farting dogs, and the sweetness of ninjas, I can occasionally start to lose it. But I think I'm better at maintaining my composure than most other people most of the time, since I do a very good job at being in the zone and not paying attention to anything except the actual typing. I wrote of anything and I just corrected that. Okay. Some people would argue that you should read multiple words ahead, and that might work for some people who have very strong memorization skills. It obviously seems to be one of Hunter Schafer's biggest advantages, but most people don't have an eidetic memory like Hunter does. For the rest of us, I definitely recommend reading only one word ahead. I believe the more you attempt to store in your brain all at once, the more likely you are going to hesitate in your typing and possibly make an error. Storing 2 or 3 words in your head while typing the current one will not cause you to go any faster than just storing one word in your head, in my opinion. When I read Typewriting Behavior, I was pleased to note that Dvorak argued the same thing a half-century before I was even born. He also suggested that typists should read only a word and a half ahead. That convinced me that what I taught myself to do on instinct was probably correct. While this is easier said than done, the secret to being consistent in competitive typing is to never pause and never hesitate. A lot of typists tend to type at their top level 100% of the time without learning to modulate. Typists like that are often capable of setting incredible and ridiculous high scores that even I can't reach, particularly if they're persistent enough to type hundreds or thousands of times until they get it right, as Michael was. Maybe I should change that to Terran. However, more often when you type like that, you crash and burn. If your only goal is to set all-time high speed records, which it is for some people, that might be a more effective strategy, but you'll never gain consistency doing that. Most of what I do in typing has the ultimate goal of never pausing in mind. Trying to center my fingers around the most frequent letters as much as possible minimizes the time between keystrokes. Attempting to adjust the speed I type easy and hard words so that I'm equally likely to make a typo on every word as much as possible is, I think, the most efficient way to maximize speed with the least expensive accuracy possible. Focusing on the next word means I will never have to suddenly stop after typing a word, but focusing on only the next word means I won't cause my brain to think about too many things at once and increase the probability of making an error. Everything is about finding the golden mean between speed and accuracy. Michael DeRoche went arguably too far in one direction, while Aaron Adams went too far in the other. I seem to accidentally train myself to find the perfect sweet spot in between, and that is where I am going to stop. That was probably about a third of the chapter. There was much more than this, but I'm not going to spoil everything. And all right, there weren't really any significant comments. Well, there was one. All right, is keeping your wrists straight important? Probably not. Comfort is important. I mean, you've seen me do this. Not while I'm reading, but whenever I'm typing, I just. Well, you can't see the keyboard because of where I have the thing mounted, but you know I lean my leg on the desk, and I don't even use any ergonomic things, and I haven't gotten repetitive stress. RSI, I forgot what the I was. I haven't gotten that ever, as far as I can tell. I mean, my wrists were one of the only things that really never hurt. It's all about what's finding comfort. I think if people do get RSI from typing, it's because they are typing in an uncomfortable way. And I think the home row method is uncomfortable, and people are trained to do that. That's not saying you can't be fast on it, because some people are, but it's harder, and I do think it's harder on the hands. Kathy did have some arthritic issues that hurt her, and she was probably the most conformist home row of all of us. She even typed ED with the same finger, which you probably shouldn't do. I am planning on David. I am planning on launching a. I'm planning on launching a Patreon for my book in the next couple weeks. I've been slowly working on that, and I am going to submit 2 chapters a month, a chapter every 2 weeks. I have almost the last 9 chapters entirely written, and then I'm going to work on the rest after that. I have 17 chapters, so I am going to try to have this done by 9 months, which would be the end of the year. If you rewind this video, David, if you can do that, I talked about all the main things about the process of my typing. I skipped how I typed each individual letter, but I talked about the general strategies I used for speeding up on the faster words, slowing down on the slower words, and how that's the best way to avoid errors, in my opinion. The letters you should center your hand on. The letters you should center your hands on. I talk about most of that stuff here. I went into how I type each individual letter, but I'm not going to do that here because I don't want to give the entire chapter away. But I did go more publicly into detail on my typing strategy than I ever did on my site. I mean, I said most of this stuff on the TypeRacer Discord too, but you'd have to search through long archives, and I made thousands of posts there. Any advantage between hovering and resting your wrist arms? I don't know. I think I always rested them. I don't think I ever hovered. That would probably depend on the person, and it might depend on the shape of the hand too, because not everybody's hand is shaped the same way. Which keyboard did I feel the most comfortable on? Rubber domes and chiclets are... No, sorry. Rubber domes are the worst. Mechanicals and chiclets are the most comfortable. Um, Rubber domes are significantly less, and laptops I find significantly less. I did not grow up with laptops because I couldn't afford them. I mean, so I'm not used to them very much. I don't really have a good place to mount them. I'm a lot slower on laptops. Almost never compete on Type Racer on laptops. I have in the past. I actually competed on Type Racer some, I think, while I was at the Ultimate Typing Championship on my laptop, and I was terrible that weekend. And I once competed on Type Racer on a bus, which was insane. But I so I don't like laptop keyboards, and I don't like rubber domes, but I do like mechanicals and chiclets, and I usually get chiclets because they are cheaper and I'm paycheck to paycheck. Um, is there anything else people want? Oh yeah, hello Copa, that's a lot of emojis. Okay, I'll give it a couple minutes before I disconnect. What muscles do I use? I know almost nothing about... Sorry, I know almost nothing about anatomy. I don't even know what any of the muscles are called. Well, I mean, I know there's abdominal muscles and biceps and quadriceps. I don't know where any of those are, so I probably wouldn't be able to tell you that. Um, oh my fingers. Oh right, there's the tarsals and carpals and metatarsals. I don't really know where any of those are either. I mean, I know nothing about anatomy. Um, um, all right, I'll try to get back. I'll try to get back to you, David, when I quietly when I quickly look up all this anatomy of the hand stuff that I know basically nothing about. I say you definitely shouldn't spend more than 2 hours a day practicing this, especially because it's not very important at all. I mean, it won't really get you jobs, and there are just so many better things you should be doing. And I also think past 2 hours, you're really gonna burn out on almost anything as well. I would say maybe 1 hour. I mean, in my heyday on Type Racer, I did 50 races a day, which to me took like 30 or 40 minutes, and I found that to be a really good way to remain at my peak, but not go beyond it and not crash and burn. I mean, I would never want to type 24 hours a day straight like Keegan or somebody like that sometimes does. Um, okay, POQ underscore Y. Yes, I think typing as an adult is easier than typing as a child. Um, Especially because hands don't change shape much in adulthood. Well, obviously, every part of you is going to be growing during childhood, so you're going to have to keep adapting um, as your hand changes. Um, okay. Okay. You were not asking so much about specific muscles, David. You were asking about the motions more than the muscles. That helps. I think I do. I think I do put a lot of forearm into it, especially with my right hand. My left hand, I'm a lot more conventional. I mean, centering on ASER, which is my preference, is not that far off from centering on ASDF. I don't do anything very weird there, but centering my centering my three centrally located fingers on the right hand on NIO is very weird when you're supposed to do JKL, I guess. But NIO are so much more frequent that it's so much faster, especially typing TION words. Um, so I think as a result, I think I do put a lot of forearm into my motions. I think I put forearm more into my right hand motions because what I do with my right hand is so much weirder than what I do with my left hand. Um, Jensen fan, wouldn't have, I probably wouldn't have bothered changing to Dvorak. Then I'd never heard of it, but um, it wasn't in the schools. It wasn't in the mass distributed keyboards. It would have taken a lot of effort to adapt a QWERTY keyboard you could buy in a store. I mean, nobody was selling Dvorak keyboards in stores in the 90s. You would have had to adapt it, and I wasn't that hardcore a programming type. I mean, I know a lot of stuff, but not enough to be employable as a programmer. Right now, I'm working in a call center, but I will. I think the people who are really into Dvorak are also the people who are really into gear, keyboard mechanics, and having latest the latest computer specs and stuff. And that was never really me. I was always like several years behind. I was the poorest person in the gifted classes in my high school. For instance, there were only like a couple of us who got discounts on our and fee waivers on our SATs and our AP exams. I couldn't even afford my high school yearbooks; they were too expensive. So I couldn't afford keyboard gear. The only reason I had computers at all growing up was because my uncle was the chief assistant to the head of the University of Maryland Department of Computer Science. Um, in the 90s and early 2000s before he lost his grant money, and he kept sending me his old computers and stuff. So I mean, they were always equipped with QWERTY, and I would have, and I wasn't that hardcore a computer user or into gear or stuff to like think about adapting my keyboard or stuff. I can't really see an alternative history where I would have learned Dvorak. No, I never got any security certificates. I mostly just learned through college computer science courses at Cornell, and those were mostly at the 100 and 200 levels. I'm I think I'm really good with databases, but I don't have broad enough knowledge. I mean, I have bits and pieces of all sorts of languages. I never got any security certificates. I'm honestly fine. I'm honestly fine working in the call center where I am now. I mean, my student loans will be paid off if I am still at work 10 years after I was hired, which is um, 4 years, 7 months from now. It's not that far. And I'm doing something where I'm helping people. It's kind of dangerous now with the coronavirus because we're considered essential personnel, and I do have to go into work, and we are not working at home, and I'm concerned about that. But I I lost most of my past career ambitions, and I'm kind of fine with that. We're going into an era where everything's decaying, and nobody has much of a future, especially with especially with climate change coming and stuff. So, um, I'm okay with a working class job. I lost my career ambitions, and one of the great things about my job is I was able to do a lot of writing on my book between calls. I mean, obviously not now because the coronavirus is a lot less downtime, but um, I'm pretty I'm pretty fine not being uh, on an upper middle class career path anymore. I sort of gave up, but I don't mind. I'm more contented than I was when I was trying to be on the cutting edge where I really didn't belong. I really didn't fit in the professional class very well. Um, the Cornell people didn't accept me well, and even going back to high school, I fit in better with B students than I ever did with honors students because they weren't really trying to impress anyone, and they were just doing what they did, and I was more respectful of that than I was for the people who were like trying to impress everybody by being in all the activities. Um, Typing the next key before releasing the previous key. Um, I would say, yeah, you probably should start the motion typing the next key before you have finished the motion of typing the previous key. You 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 want to minimize the time between keys as much as possible, but you want to make sure you don't finish one key before typing the other. But yes, you do want to try to minimize that. That is probably the fastest way, and that is why the emphasis should be on typing digraphs and minimizing how long it takes you to type two-letter combinations. Um, so yeah, David, I think that's right. I didn't go into over that specifically in my book, but I think that's right. Um, JJ, I was recognized once by a coworker. Well, kind of twice. There was another coworker who um, mentioned me on Reddit, or it was like somebody linked the YouTube video on Reddit and oh, I know this guy or something. I don't know if I ever talked to him about typing, but yeah, just two people. It's not like people on the streets of Syracuse go, dude, I just recognized your typing video. I even make that joke in the book somewhere, but I'm a lot more famous online and offline. I'm a non-entity offline, and that's good because I like still having my anonymity offline and people not hassling me because for a while people were really hassling me. If you look at the YouTube comments from like 2012, they're awful, they're grotesque. Now, most of my fame now is more positive now. People are giving me a lot less grief than they did 7 or 8 years ago. That period was awful, but um I'm pretty anonymous in real life, and that's my preference, especially because I'm an extreme introvert. Um, and I guess that's all I have to say about that. Although I do write 3 semi-biographical chapters on myself that I may read parts of here this month, where I go into more detail on that stuff. Anything else? No, not jealous. More like comedic sociopathy is what the internet rewards. I mean, when you quantify people's social behavior, which is entirely insane, but that's what the internet does. That's what like buttons and upvotes and all that stuff does. The things that attract the most votes are always the most snarky, obnoxious, and ironic comments, and it's so exhausting. And now it crosses over into everyday life. Um, that's the thing about that's the thing about places like Reddit. The people on there are so knowledgeable about so many things, but um, and the informed, well thought out comments, they always get tons of likes, but the snarky, ironic, short one-liners always get more. It's frustrating. That's how the entire internet works. But I mean, I find people are both more knowledgeable and more obnoxious than they have been in general in decades, and it's weird. It's like as people got more knowledgeable, they also got more obnoxious. Um, do I find numbers easier to type? Their numbers are about as easy for me as punctuation is. I think I find punctuation a little faster than numbers, but I am closer to my letter speed on punctuation and numbers than I am on than most other typists are, and that's one of my advantages too. Um, Numbers are definitely harder to type than letters, but um, they're not they're not that hard. The hardest thing about them is that it's harder to reach that row, honestly, because it's above where the fingers want to go. That's the only real thing. I'm I'm going to get offline shortly after this, JJ. I may do some type racer or maybe even a private track on one of the days this month, but I'm just talking and reading today and my voice is already wearing out. David, I'm not the person to ask about keyboards. To me, keyboards are keyboards. I didn't really notice a lot of speed differentials. Um, all right. I noticed that rubber dome keyboards. I wasn't, I wasn't slower on them, but I was a lot less accurate. So yeah, I was slower on them. Rubber domes were slippery, and I was less accurate, and therefore slower on them. Mechanicals and chiclets, basically anything, any of those were um, fine. Um, But as for keyboard switches, there are a lot of people who know a lot more about that stuff than I do. I mean, just like I don't know much about anatomy, I don't know much about keyboard mechanics either. I would recommend going to the Mechanical Keyboards subreddit or the site geekhack.com. Those are the people who really know about and love keyboards. To me, they were just tools, and I didn't really care much. Um, those are the people who care, the Mechanical Keyboard subreddit and geekhack.com. I would recommend going those places. They would have much better advice than I would, I think. They're the people who really know about gear. I don't. Um, Beck, there's somebody I haven't heard from in years. Yeah, I'm typing at an average of about 184 words per minute on TypeRacer lately. I was at 164 words per minute when I initially joined in 2009, so it would have been then, I guess, because I was exactly 20 words per minute less than I am now. Um, 2009, when I was 24, is when I was more or less where I was at now, and my 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 curve has been very similar to that of Alan McCreary, Mako 640 on TypeRacer, and he has always been like 15 words per minute or 20 words per minute behind me the whole time. We've improved together at exactly the same rate. 15 to 20 words per minute difference between us the whole time. Um, so we both peaked at about the same time, but he's a little younger than I am, so um, let me look up his age on Typing Zone for a second. Um, oh, I clicked on the wrong thing there. Okay, he is 3 years younger than me, so it seems like for those who learn how to type as kids, we probably generally peak in our early 20s and don't improve much more after our early 20s, although it would probably be different for people who learned to type later. Like I know Andre Christescu didn't learn to type until 16 or something, and he still got really fast. So I would say people have probably done most of their improvement by their mid 20s if they learn as kids, but it might be different if you learn later. Um, it took me, JJ, it took me 5 years to go from 215 words per minute to 220 words per minute. It took me like 5 years to improve that record. And I was not going on 10 fast fingers every day, only like every few months or so. But it still took me a long time to get up to 220 in the first place. I don't think I can get a 233 or a 234 and break check. The thing is, he has a faster top speed than I do, period. I don't think I could get a 300 on Type Racer either. Maybe I could if I wanted to put hundreds of hours into getting a 300 like Taran did into getting a 400, but or what he calls a 400. I say 394, but that's just nerdy nitpicking. Um, I don't have the fastest top speed. Taran has the fastest top speed. If anybody breaks checks 233, it is going to be Taran. If not Taran, then it's going to be Bailey, in my opinion. One of those two. Or Alpha Panda, although Alpha Panda didn't want to verify his. Those three typists all have a faster top speed than I do now, I think. I'm not sure if Bailey has beaten my record on Type Racer yet, but um, I would say one of those three can do it. I would say I can't because I don't have the fastest top speed. And what those sites measure is top speed. But I still have the fastest average speed, and that's fine by me. Anything else? Man, is my neck aching. That was a weird place for me to be leaning. Okay, I will hang up in 2 minutes, 11:53, if I don't get any more comments. Okay, I've already answered that. At what age did I break 100 words per minute? The first time I broke 100 words per minute was in 1995 when I was 10 years old at um, 108 words per minute on the application CPT Personal Touch Typing. That was a DOS app by a word processor manufacturer that had just gone out of business. They apparently were trying to hedge their bets by offering programs for typing for computers too, but they didn't make any computers themselves, so the company went out of business, so very little is known about this game, but I managed to track some stuff down through old newspapers, and I found the guy who made the game. But I made a printout from that game that I posted on my eponymous website, seanrona.com, and that has proof of that. Yeah, David, I haven't really been very shy about um, what keys I use with what fingers. Um, but I want to leave the um, my specific descriptions for the book. I don't want to give everything away. Like I said, I mean, I read an awful lot of that chapter already. Um, but yeah, if you search the Discord chat room or my old YouTube comments, I definitely go into a lot of the nitty gritty there, but I don't want to publicize that much. Um, JJ, I still post on the Type Racer Discord and a couple of other typing discords, much less. right now, and that's where most of the people are. Um, and I still make comments a few days a week at those places. So yeah, I still talk with those people. Michael is the only one who's really opted out. Well, others have stopped competing, but I still talk with some of them on spin-offs of the Type Racer Discord. But um, Michael is the only one I actually call on the phone because he's gone completely offline. Um, there are some others who don't participate in the chats, like Aaron Adams, the most accurate typist. He doesn't participate in the chat rooms. But I talk to him some. There are a few other people. Um, if you were going to if you were going to practice if you were going to practice typing things with alternate fingers, well, I said you should center your fingers on ASER and then NIO. Um, yeah, David, it will improve your typing speed by definition because people are not trained traditionally to focus their keys on the most frequent letters. NIO are the most frequent letters on the right hand, so that is where your fingers should be. Um, but people don't think about the probability of letters, and that's extremely important. Um, I'm not sure I've seen anybody even talk about that other than me, and I've been reading a lot of the old books. I read, in addition to reading Dvorak's book, all 500 pages of it, and man, I am a lot more impressed by Dvorak's typing instruction than his layout. I think there are a couple things wrong with his layout, but he was an amazing instructor. So people think I'm Dvorak bashing. I have a chapter entirely devoted to Dvorak, and I think that he had the best instructional guide, better than any of the actual typists did. I read George Hosfield and Cortez Peters Jr.'s books, and they were boring, and they didn't really have any great information, and it was just standard typing drills that I think are wrong. So Dvorak, even though he wasn't a great typist himself, seemed to understand typing more deeply, but he didn't understand that home row was wrong, that QWERTY wasn't designed for it. Um, in fact, the reason most of the most frequent keys are on the top row, that was on purpose on QWERTY. Um, the vowels were moved onto the top row along with the T on purpose for very specific reasons, which I will go into in the first chapter. Um, yeah, you should focus on practicing by taking a look at the most at the frequencies of keys on the keyboard and trying to center your keys as close as possible to the most frequent letters. That is the main thing that is important. I suppose you could put your right index finger on the H instead of the N too. The H comes up a ton also. But the reason I would say the N instead is one, because the N is more frequent than the H, although it's pretty close. And because the H can be typed with either your left or right hand. And I tend to alternate. I tend to type the H with my left hand when it's the last letter of a word so I can use the spacebar for my right thumb. So like I'll actually type with the H with my left hand, but I will type the H in without with my right hand, and I'll type the H in math with my left hand and the H in mathematics with my right hand. I vary it up on the word, so because I try to type as many words as possible with the last letter with one of my left hand fingers so it won't interfere with my spacing. And since I am the fastest spacer, I think that helps too. But yeah, it's mostly about the probability of the letters. And people don't nearly press the spacebar or focus on the spacebar enough because that is more frequent than any of the letters. So you want to focus on the spacebar and the most frequent letters. Focusing on the F and J, meh, doesn't matter. I mean, you basically have to type those keys with the fingers home row recommends anyway, but there are much more important letters that those fingers should be typing. Anything else? If nobody replies by midnight, I will be disconnecting then. You're welcome. Yeah, thanks, David. That's really nice of you. I I have weirdly gotten into looking up the history of typing and the um, the history of typing and the mechanics. I've been enjoying looking that stuff up more than I actually enjoy typing. I don't have a lot of fun typing, but understanding the history is something I'm really enjoying, especially because there's a lot of um, interesting stuff that even connections to the civil rights movement and the women's rights movement and stuff that you wouldn't expect. It's surprisingly connected to the culture as a whole. Even nowadays with the gaming movement. So I talk a lot about the culture too, which is something a lot of people won't be expecting. Motasem, I hope I pronounced your name right. Yeah, I've typed in lots of different languages and set high scores on others. Um, and in future days, I've been doing typing videos on odd numbered days and non-typing videos on even numbered days. Um, I'm going to try and set some more 10 fast fingers records in foreign languages because I think those would be easier for me to do than breaking checks 233. And I've also typed foreign languages on the Intersteno championships, and I've set records in languages other than English in them. Like some years I was even fastest in like Polish and things. So yeah, I mean, the keys are the keys. The only thing that makes foreign languages more complex are the accents, and that'll slow you down. But it's not much different. All right. You're welcome, everyone. I'll give it another minute. I'm not sure I've ever done German on 10 fast fingers because I think I've only done the languages that don't require accent marks there. I've only really typed with accents on Intersteno. I haven't really explored foreign language typing except for Intersteno, where it's the most official test. I don't think I've ever done German on there because I didn't want to switch my keyboard layout for something other than Intersteno, but I'll look and see if I have. I don't think so, though. Man, I just forgot which one was the German flag for a second. No, I have not typed in German there. Did I type in German on Type Array? It's possible I did that. But I don't think I typed in German there either. Oh, I did type in German on Typer A. German words, I got 836 characters per minute, which is like 168 words per minute in German words in 2012. And on German sentences, I am actually leading with 761 characters per minute, 152 words per minute. So I hold the German sentences record on Type Array from 2012. I entirely forgot about that. I have set the fastest German score a few times on Intersteno too. I took Spanish in high school and French in college, but I wouldn't say I'm fluent in either, and I've certainly forgotten a lot. That was it though. I'm not as multilingual as a European or something. I read one word ahead. Um, yeah, I know Querts isn't very different from QWERTY. It's just the Z and Y change around. Although I imagine a lot of the punctuation changes around too, because I know a lot of the punctuation changes around on Azerty, which I don't like about that. Um, but yeah, it might be faster to try learning the actual layouts like Querts and Azerty for typing the accented characters. That might be worth it. I'll have to think about that. Oh wow, an hour and a half already. I didn't think it was that long. Anything else? Okay, I guess that will do it. I'm going to end the stream now. Thanks for watching. I drew more people than I expected to. That was nice. And I finally figured out how to do it with the chat, even though it seems like it might have been lagging a little more than my book release was. But yeah, look out for the Patreon in a week or two. I've got to design some sort of nifty graphic for that, but um, yeah, Josh, I'll talk to you offline about that.